What are we doing about sexual and gender-based violence? We have had a project for more than 10 years where we want to ensure rehabilitation of survivors of sexual violence, including both medical and psychosocial assistance, and also, of course, to support the reintegration of the survivors of sexual violence. Our main objectives for these projects is to strengthen the rights of women, and that all women who take part of the project should gain something out of it. We tried to focusing on both the medical and the psychosocial needs of the victims, and we want to help the victims to still believe in life in spite of the terrible things they have experienced. Another preoccupation for us is the importance of the legal and justice part of the program. Where the perpetrators have to be held accountable and responsible for the action. The society has to learn to live and how to live with the victims and how to treat them well and not stigmatize them. In this regard, I will say more about this when I will tell you about the fatherhood program, trying to do something with the root cause. But I can't talk about sexual violence programs in DRC without talking about Mama Jean and Mama Jeanette, the two ladies you see there. They are together with the 70 counselors they are having in their staff. They are my heroes. Sitting there day after day, listening to horrible stories about how they have been treated. But the main stakeholders, of course, are the victims themselves. And every time I visit Goma, or Masisi, or Kichanga, we meet with new victims from the war, victims of sexual violence. And many of them are very, very young. And let me tell you one story, and I'm not telling you the details. Let me tell you about Justine. She's 20 years old. We are calling her Justine. It's not her real name. She's coming from the Masisi area. She was newly married and pregnant in the 6th month, the day she was on her way to the field, being attacked by several soldiers. She was knocked unconscious, and she was raped by the perpetrators, and as a consequence she lost her child and she was badly hurt. With severe problems, she was taken to Mama Jeanette's center in Masisi. And from there she was taken to Kushera Hospital in Goma for medical treatment. But still, after 6 operations, she's not well. Having been told that there is nothing more to do medically. When I met her, she was preparing for her return back to her family. Back to the husband who was not informed about the fully situation. Her greatest fear was that he will not accept to take her back, since she is not able to bear him any children at all. At the same time, she expressed the gratitude to Mama Jeanette, who in her view has saved her life. She accepted that Mama Jeanette and the hospital had done whatever in their power to help her medically, but still she needs a lot of psychosocial help in the process of returning to her husband, not knowing the outcomes. we are running a lot of skill trainings. Training the female in agriculture and in other skills to make sure that they have something more to carry with them back. And we are providing legal assistance to every one of the 2,600 victims we treated last year. But not all of them are taking these cases to the jury. We had 144 cases last year, and of a total of 56 judgments in 2013, 51 were convicted and 5 were acquitted. We have also established a cooperation with MOV0D3 in Norway, which are experts on trauma treatment, and we are training these 70 counselors in trauma treatment in Congo. But saying that, I think that we need to change the way we are defining victims in the future. Of course, the female is the main victim, but we believe that the whole family of the woman also is a victim, and we should consider them like that. Because this might lead to a significant change in the way of thinking, which can be helpful to include the husband when we try to take the victims back home. And maybe it's also then easier than to start a legal process, because I think that legal process is important to change something in Congo. To make sure that we have available capacity for medical treatment of sexual violence, we started in 2010 to build a new hospital in Goma. A hospital of 250 beds, specialized for children and women. It's a nice building, and it should be a nice building because it's a hospital for women.
Yes.
So that's one of the nicest buildings in Goma, to be honest.
Oh.
In addition to the sexual violence program, we also do a lot of protection of children and mothers through the Safe Mothers project. It's dangerous to become pregnant in that part of the world. But we try to motivate women to use clinics by forming solidarity groups among pregnant women and motivating them to deliver at the health centers. It's not easy, because they don't have their own money, and there is a tradition that we can do this at home. You know. But the autonomy of decision making is linked to recognition of women's rights, and in particular the reproductive health rights. But we are establishing so-called solidarity motherhood insurance groups, where we try to help them to start activities so they can earn some more money on their own. And they are doing so. And they are earning money enough to send their children to schools. And as one of the women said, I don't need to go to my husband to ask for money to buy soap anymore. And they can spend the $5 for medical treatment at the health clinic. And we see also a change that more and more husbands have begun to take part in escorting their wives to the prenatal consultations, something that used to be absolutely taboo. That's good. And of course we have been working with the TBAs, the traditional birth attendants, who used to be an obstacle in helping delivery out of the health centers. They have now started referring to the health centers women who come to request their services. and some of the traditional birth attendants has become midwife assistants in the health centers. In addition, in North Kivu, we are running at least 2 separate mobile clinics who are driving around in the area where there is limited access to medical services to make sure that women and children got medical treatment. But the main problem when we are talking about sexual violence is how men are behaving in front of the female, of course. That's the root cause. So we started to think, how can we do something with that? Not only trying to treat the women who are abused, we need to do something with the root cause. So, peace in the world begin at home. It's the slogan used for what we call the fatherhood program.
Good.
So we have started the idea to try to train men to become men. And the whole idea and how we are starting with it is that we are asking the men, what kind of memory do you have about your father? And very many of the men we are talking to have a bad memory of their father.
Yes.
He was hurting me, he was hurting my mother, and he was not a good man. He was coming home drunk, and so on and so on. And then we are asking them, do you want your children to remember you as such? And they say, no, I don't like that. But who can change that? Who can change that? And the only one who can change that is the man himself. And we are starting from there. And we are running a training course in being a man for 14 full days.
Yes.
And at the moment we have trained about 3,000 Congolese men in how to be a man. Mainly religious leaders, society leaders, police, and armed groups. So, as one of them said, in the training we were reflecting over many questions. How to become a better father? Who is the man? What is his responsibility? How can we avoid violence in the family and in the society? These questions made me ask whether I'm a good man or not. And another said, I always used to think that it was MONUSCO who should bring peace to the world and to the Congolese people. But in this fatherhood training, I have learned that peace in the world begins at home. So I am responsible. The fatherhood facilitators, which are all Congolese, had a particular experience in 2013, where 150 militaries attending the training, which is a new experience for the project. And the testimonies from these participants have been very, very encouraging for the facilitators. The team receives calls from some of the participants telling them what the teaching has meant to them in their own lives. According to the information from the fatherhood team, around 90% of the military participants have expressed that they enrolled themselves in the military because of a violent childhood. Many of them who has also stated that they have not considered their own behavior as a violent before they have received a new knowledge during the training. So the personal testimonies show that they are more aware of their own ability to change and how they can focus on positive thinking instead of negative thinking, and how they can gain better control of the circumstances rather than being controlled by the circumstances. Another element shared by the facilitators is the fact that their relationship to their own spouse has changed dramatically. They see her more like an equal partner and an important person in their lives, rather than someone to dominate. And the Fatherhood Project had been subject to a research from a research institute in Norway called FAFO, a well-known institute, where they have tried to look into what we are doing. They have had access to all the interviews we are doing with the men in advance and afterwards. And the researcher pointed out that the perception of masculinity and the man's roles in DRC Congo is unclear. Due to the war and the instability in the country, and that this is one of the main challenges for the country, new ideas concerning what it means to be a man may be in the making among parts of the younger population. But for the time being, no clear roles for men have emerged. Based on these reflections, it is logical conclusion that the fatherhood training is an answer to the needs of many men in Congo today. And that it gives an answer to the frustration and the question concerning manhood and masculinity. Through the training, the participants get a higher awareness of other ideals and other values, which are still understood as a part of being a man. This might be one reason why so many of the participants seem to be enthusiastic about this approach. Based on this mentioned research done by FAFO on joint fatherhood project in the area, I have some closing remarks. Sexual and gender-based violence is not only an issue for women. It is also an issue and of utmost concern for men. It is anyhow a fact that Eastern Congo has more reported sexual violence than any other places in the world. At the same time, we must stress that the majority of the men in DRC do not commit sexual violence or other form of gender-based violence. The war in DRC is one of the deadliest since the Second World War, and the consequences for the civilian population have been devastating. Life in Eastern Congo is extremely difficult, and many people constantly face despair in their daily life. There is no typical man or perception of masculinity in Eastern Congo. But I think it's correct, though, to say that the main understanding of manhood is to be the breadwinner and pay for marriage according to the tradition of dowry. But being this kind of man and husband has become harder and harder in the chaos of almost permanent conflicts. The traditional relationship between women and men has been challenged by the lack of stability and increased hardship faced by almost all households in the area. Many men find it almost impossible to uphold the traditional role as the breadwinner and the protector of the family. And contribution increasingly involve economic activities outside the household for women more than men these days. So the lack of income, along with the insecurity that undermines traditional views about manhood and masculinity, is a challenge. Finding a job in the war-afflicted area of Eastern DRC is not an easy task. Masculinity is not necessarily about what a man is, but rather what he should be or be able to do. To have a wife, to have children, and be their protector constitutes social obligation that man feels he needs to fulfill in order to become an adult and a real citizen. So I think it is important in the future to consider also to see and include more new roles for men and women in a new society, in a new time, to try to avoid any kind of sexual violence in DRC and also other ways, of course. And then at the same time, give women her deserved human rights. Thank you.
We would like to thank you very much for your presentation too. And today we're having a little gift for you as well.
Thank you very much.